Well, Abahlali baseMjondolo, Secretary General Thapelo Mohapi joins us now to give us his understanding of what things are looking like, particularly in informal settlements with the bitterly cold weather that has gripped many parts of the country. Mr. Mohapi, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I believe that you are in KwaZulu-Natal. As you speak to some of your members, some of the most sensitive and hard-hit areas where informal settlements are concerned with this adverse weather.
Yes, good evening, Naledi. I just came now from Ward 75, 117, where there are very strong winds in Durban at the moment. People's homes in the transit camp in Ward 75 have been swept away by the wind. And of course, in Ward 75, when I left, there were about 14 of those houses who left people destitute. We don't know the number of communities that are affected, but there are heavy winds. In the Chatsworth area, as I speak, some of the areas do not have electricity because the stations for the electricity have been affected as a result of the wind at the current moment. Of course, in Johannesburg, in Bramfeature, in an informal settlement that we work with in Mountain View, we've lost 2 lives, 2 minors, 2 toddlers, an 8-year-old, a year 2 Mbanza, and a 6-year-old Tabiso Mbanza, were died as a result of a fire on Sunday morning. We still don't know of the fire, what the cause of fire, because the father is still in hospital and a 1-year-old child is still also in hospital fighting for their lives. But we do suspect that it is, of course, because of the weather and people trying to keep warm and using izimbawula, the braziers, to keep themselves warm. And of course, like anyone else, when you have kept warm, you forget to actually, switch off the fire. But the Mountain View informal settlement does not have access to electricity, and it's in a very open space. The cold front in Johannesburg could have led into a fire in this particular family. So an entire family, only the mother, who's depressed, who is unable to tell the story at the moment as to what exactly happened. The father is in hospital and another child, 1-year-old, is in hospital, and the 2 have actually perished as a result.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Thapelo, when we do have fires in informal settlements, they do tend to spread quite quickly. So in the case in Mountain View, is that just one home that has been affected, or are there more?
Well, the fortunate part in particular settlement is that they are separated from each other. So it affected one family.
Okay.
5 people were affected, but 2 have died and 2 are still in hospital. And the mother is just, at the moment, trying to give her some space so that she gets some counseling after that.
Yeah. Thapelo, I will ask you just later what the kind of help that family needs, but you mentioned earlier 14 homes at informal settlements in KwaZulu-Natal that have been blown away as a result of the heavy winds. Talk to me about those families, how they're coping at the moment, what aid they're receiving, and if authorities have been on the scene to give some assistance as well. And where exactly that was, if you're able to remind us of that.
Yes, in the Barcelona informal settlement in Ward 75, there are people. But at the moment, what we are using is actually trying to find families to actually house those who are affected. So there has not been a response from government, and hopefully by the morning tomorrow, we will have governments coming on board. In Ward 75, the same has happened. Ask nearby low-cost housing people in the community, to those who still have space in their families, actually assist the members. We are hoping that disaster will respond tomorrow, but it's a dire situation. As I said, the situation could be worse, because I'm talking about a heavy wind that is not has happened, but it's currently happening. As I was come to my place, I receive calls from people to say that there are more houses that have been swept away by the wind.
Sure. And so a desperate situation that continues to unfold and likely into the night. So it's going to be a very difficult night for people at that Barcelona informal settlement in KwaZulu-Natal. I know that this is a difficult time, but certainly to raise this conversation, Thapelo, but there is the issue of authorities time and again warning residents of informal settlements that low-lying areas in some particular areas really sensitive to damage when we do have adverse weather, and seemingly yet when we do have storms and cold fronts such as these, we end up back in that conversation. Are we getting that message across to vulnerable communities, or is it a matter of there just not being enough options for them?
Yes, but I think it's out of desperation. It's not that people do not want to be in a safe environment, but because, I mean, the one informal settlement in Barcelona is a transit camp, so it's a temporary relocation that was created by the government. So these were sheds that were built by government so that people could move into housing. But as we know, that the transit camp in KwaZulu-Natal become permanent structures. Especially this one is more than 20 years in existence. So it was easy for it to be, swept by the wind because it's structures that were built about 15 years ago. But the others, of course, are structures that have been erected by the people by themselves. And there are many other people who still continue to live along the riverbanks and in areas that are very dangerous to winds and, of course, floods and so forth. So there are ways, as baseMjondolo, that we are trying to advise government. And one of the ways is that we have what is called the People's Plan, building human settlement in times of climate change. It's a document that makes it very clear to government what needs to be done before a disaster happened, during a disaster, and after the aftermath of the disaster. Yeah. So we are hoping that government will put it in, and particularly in eThekwini, in the IDP, and ensure that these things are implemented. But also we are looking at having foot soldiers on the ground in the informal settlements that will deal with effects of disasters, whether it's a fire, floods, and so forth and so on.
Yeah. I know one thing about South Africans is we do have such big hearts, and for those that would like to assist, how do we do that? Are you able to give us a central point where we can perhaps contribute to those families that are really out in the cold this week?
Yes. The family in Mountain View at the moment, they even now they don't even how to bury their loved ones. I would advise people to call our office on 031 304 6420. Yeah. Or alternatively on 084 576 5117. We would really appreciate the assistance of this family. The mother, when you speak to her, she just cries and tears. And it's understandable that somebody who has gone through that, lost 2 kids, and of course one in hospital and the husband. It's a very desperate situation, and therefore we are calling on those who can assist to reach out, particularly for this particular time that they lay their loved ones to rest. Yeah.
Thapelo, thank you so much for that. Thapelo Mohapi is the Secretary General of Abahlali baseMjondolo, as we all struggle and work to stay warm over the next few days, and certainly as the storm continues, this cold front, that is, thoughts going out to some of the vulnerable communities. If you'd like to assist those that are in informal settlements, unable now to rebuild, those that have lost their homes in KwaZulu-Natal, and the family in Mountain View that has lost 2 children as a result of a fire, that number 031 304 6420.